Okay, we're continuing in Halacha Aleph. We're going to read a little more of the Mechaber and the Ramah for this. The Mechaber says, if you saw Yoshmi B'chutz, if the person was, the guy was milking his cows, and the Yid was sitting outside, if you know that the guy has no treif animals in his herd, in his corral, so then mutter, I feel, and you saw Yochel Roisa, even if you can't see him, it's kosher, because he couldn't be doing anything wrong, because there's no treif animals inside. What happens if he did have a David Tami in his corral, in his herd? The guy is milking the cows, and the Yid, and he has treif animals in there. Okay, there's treif animals in there that could be milked, and the Yid is outside, so he can't see. I feel in even if he can't see him while he's sitting down. I mean, that's what he is. He's sitting outside saying to him, and he can't see the guy milking inside, and the guy has treif animals inside. And even so, in Yachal Rosa Kushu made, if when he would stand up, he'd be able to see. He could see through the window. He could see the guy inside. That's mutter. Then it's mutter. The milk is, we'll say Chalav Yisroel. That milk is mutter. Sheyare Shem Yamad V'Yerehu. Because the guy is afraid that the Yid's going to get up and look into the window and see him. So therefore, it's considered, it's good enough, even though the Yid sees nothing. And the guy has treif animals inside of it. But since he could easily just pick his head up and just look inside, so the guy's afraid of being caught. And therefore the guy won't mix in treif milk, and that's good enough. V'hu, and Mechaber now is, summarizing, saying a comment on everything he just said, V'hu, she'yidei shechov tami asal Yisrael. This whole assumption only works if the guy knows that Yidden don't eat treif milk, that they don't eat milk from treif animals. Because if he didn't know that, he has nothing to be afraid of. We're saying there's a mirror. He's afraid that the Yid's going to look into the window. If he doesn't realize that he's supposed to be following certain rules, he's not afraid. He'll just innocently make the mistake. Okay, so if he knows that the Yid only wants cow's milk, and he has a horse that he could milk, then he knows the Yid might catch him, so he'd be afraid and he wouldn't do it. Okay, that's Mechaber. Let's read a little bit of the Ramah also just for what we need today. It's quite a long Ramah here, but we're going to read just a little part. The Yid has to be there at the beginning of the milking. The year he has to see that there's nothing in the kli. Think about it. If you come into a farm and you make sure that the milking is only done with cow's milk, but in the tank was already 100 gallons of treif milk beforehand, what's the point? What are you wasting your time looking beforehand? So the Ramah says, you have to come in there and make sure that the kalim are empty before you start the milking. He adds on further. We won't even let a Yid use a guy's kli at all. Even if you check it before and you're still not allowed to use it. Maybe there are little drops of milk that are left in there. I mean, even if you checked it, maybe you didn't do a great job. That word really comes from halacha beis. It has to do with, in cheese, we're afraid there's little drops of milk in it. So the minhag is you don't even use the guy's kelim in a second. We'll talk about this in a second. These two chumras, it's actually a shayla what the Ramah means. But these kind of things you don't have to be machmir for, but the you don't have to be machmir, it's only chatchil. Okay, so in these words, the Mechaber, there's going to be more in Ramah later, but in these words, the Mechaber and the Ramah told us what it takes to make milk Chalav Yisroel. Okay, now, just for the contrast of it, you have to know that the Mishnah says that milk, in order to be kosher, has to have Yisroel Ro'ehu. That's the Mishnah says, the Yid has to see it, and the Gemara says, it's a very interesting way the Gemara says it. The Gemara says, Tanina lahad Tanah Rabbanan. Our Mishnah is Tanina lahad Tanah Rabbanan, like we learned in the Brisa. And then the Gemara brings a Brisa that says exactly the opposite of the Mishnah. Okay? The Brisa says, what it said, the Mechaber said, that the Yid doesn't have to watch it. The Yid can sit outside, and even if he could stand up, then he could see it. What the Mechaber brought down, that's from the Gemara later on. Okay, so Brisa says, wait, what's going on over here? The Mishnah said you have to see it. It says the milk has to be shachol, akav yisor re'eu, and the Gemara says Tanina lahad Rabbanan. Look, they have a brisa just like us, and it says you don't have to see it. So Taisa says what the Gemara means to say is that the Gemara means to say is that you see from the brisa that when it says yisor re'eu, it didn't mean that Yisrael has to see it. It means Yisrael has to be able to see it. That's good enough. It doesn't have to actually see it. He has to be able to see it. Even though the Mishnah says Yisroel Re'ehu, the word Yisroel Re'ehu doesn't mean this Yid has to actually see it. He doesn't have to have his eyeballs on the milk as they're squeezing the milk out of the cow, but he has to just have he has to be able to see it. And being able to see it is good enough. What? Okay, this is, as you can imagine, this is going to come up. We're not going to do that for today, but in the next time, probably the next two times when we talk about Chal Stam, the idea is, are there ways to be Mavar that it's kosher milk without actually standing there? Okay, that's the next bunch of times is about that. Okay, but for now, that's what we're seeing. And the Machabers bring this to the Yid can be sitting outside, saying his Tehillim, and he's sitting outside. He can't even see if he looks in. But if he would stand up, he'd see it. That would be good enough. So that those kind of things work, even though the Yid's not seeing anything, but he could see. That's good enough.
What do you have to be there?
That's a question. You made an assumption, and the person can talk about this. The Gemara does say the Yid has to be there. So the assumption is the Yid does have to be there to make that. That's a question we'll talk about for the coming time. All of those are questions that have to do with if there are other ways to be Mevarah without stealing there. Okay, that's for Chol Stam in the next couple of times.
So,
okay, not today.
So that's for Chol Stam, for Chalav Yisroel.
It's the same question. Well, okay, whether, I'm going to jump you ahead. Probably 3 times from that. No, really, 3 times from that. Is there ways to make what we call Chalav Yisroel with the Yid seeing it, like, I believe 3 times from now is going to be about by video camera. Okay, there are other ways to be Mevarah without the Yid stealing it.
No, he's talking about Yotzeh V'Nichta. You know, the guy goes from farm to farm, but he doesn't.
That's what when I was at the Mashkiach for the Laborers a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so he goes from farm to farm.
Right.
So he's not necessarily there.
We're coming right heading over to there. Okay. So the Taz and Shach say that you see from this that there's no need for the Yid to actually even be there the whole time. Even though the Gemara said the Yid has to is sitting outside. Sitting outside, the idea is to create a mercy. So Yotzeh V'Nichta does the trick also. Okay, they say Yotzeh V'Nichta does the trick also. Okay, that's another step further. Because at least in the case the Mishnah said the Yid has to watch it. The Gemara said he doesn't have to watch it, he has to be able to watch it. But at least he was outside. Now we said he doesn't even have to be able to watch it, he has to be able to come and watch it, which creates the same mercy. Okay, that's the same idea that it creates a mercy. Okay?
Well, outside, what does it mean? Outside, it has to be the wall down.
Right, so maybe a mile away, because okay, you could say like that. Also, it really comes, they bring it from the Shulchan in Kof Chav Tes, in a couple of simanim later by Yayin, that you can watch something by being Yotzeh V'Nichta. Okay. And in fact, like David said, when you make Chalav Yisroel, there's no such thing as the guy who stands there for every minute of the day. Right? Every guy's got to go to the bathroom, go down chakras. Not such thing that no one's standing there all the time. Everyone has a certain amount of Yotzeh V'Nichta. Okay. The Pri Chodesh by us brings that in Sim Kuf Chav Tes, where the Shulchan talks about how you make a Yotzeh V'Nichta, the Shulchan says that if there's more than one guy, then it doesn't help to be Yotzeh V'Nichta. And the thinking is that if there are 2 goyim there, then one guy will be the lookout. He'll watch out to see if the Yid is coming, and then the other guy can do whatever he wants to. Okay, over there it's talking about wine, but the Pri said the same thing for here. If there's one guy who could stand as a lookout, like he'll stand by the road. When the rabbi's coming, he'll tell the other guys, the rabbi's coming, stop playing around with the milk. So he says he can't have a Yotzeh V'Nichta. Can't have Yotzeh V'Nichta if there are 2 goyim. Because if there are 2 goyim, then one guy, you can't say the guy's busy with his milking, because the guy who's not busy with the milking will be the lookout and tell you that he has to look after him. Okay, big difference.
Yeah, you only just take a cup of wine just a second.
So,
there's no common things in that. And go from the other farm thing.
So that's correct. That the difference is by wine, it's very easy for him to do the switch. So the Pri Chodesh is talking about, the Pri Chodesh actually says his point on the case of Yesh David Tamid Bedrei. Okay, there are 2 cases in the Shulchan. By the case of Yesh David Tamid Bedrei, there's horses and cows right there. He could easily squeeze in some horses. Look, so Mamela having a look out gives him that. It just takes him a second to get it in. So you have to be Kosher for it. But if it would be Ein David Tamid Bedrei, then it would be okay. So in our farms we're a little safer because we usually Ein David Tamid Bedrei. The Mashkiach walks in the morning, sees all he sees is cows. So then it takes longer for the guy to switch it in. So then the lookout would have to be somebody. The lookout giving him another minute's notice is not going to be enough. You can't get rid of the horse so quickly. Okay, that's it. But there is an afkamina. And the afkamina is like this. What happens if we assign? I don't know what goes on by Lema. We start up with Chassidish friends and kind of. I don't know what goes on by him. But if let's say we set up a situation where we have Chalav Yisroel on 5 farms. Okay, and these 5 farms that we have set up are half an hour drive from one another. Okay, they're all spread around all of Wisconsin. Okay, so then, guess what? There are cell phones now, right? So that means when I show up at farm number A, the guy from this farm tells the guy in the beat, you got a half an hour clear. The guy's a half an hour from you. So it would seem that if that's the setup, you can't make Chalav Yisroel. But the Pre-Chodesh said that if there's two of them that can look out for each other, it doesn't work. And we're saying, fine, that's means is two would mean is that the one could call to the other one would be enough time. So 500 years ago, that just meant the guy was out by the door. And if it was ain't double turned enter, it basically didn't make a difference. But nowadays, I could be half an hour away from the person, and a half an hour away from him, this guy tells the other one, the rabbi's by me now, that means you're safe for the next half hour. So then there's
which farm he's going to, that he knows a farm A knows about farm B, and they have a shaykhah.
Right. It's if they're no one knows from each other is one thing, but it's not Yotzeh v'nichnas. It's not if they're all supplying the same guy and they all know, so then there's a lookout. That's the case of the Pre-Chodesh. It's really the case for the Shulchan Aruch. That if there's another guy to tell him, doesn't help. The same thing would be is if the rabbi always stays in the same hotel. Okay, and the hotel is a half an hour away from here. When he walks into the hotel, the guy's allowed to tell guys, you're safe, he's okay. Or if they know that the guy goes down Kashrus. Every morning at 7 o'clock, he packs out for an hour to go down Kashrus. He down the Language Manor, he doesn't show back till 8 o'clock. Okay, so if they know a Yotzeh Nefesh only works if they have immerses. If they don't have immerses and has enough time for them to do something, then that's it. Then it's not Yotzeh Nefesh. So we didn't create the Chalav Yisroel. We didn't even do the Yotzeh Nefesh. Okay, so it's something to keep in mind. It happens to be.
This is a statement. It's not a question.
It's a statement. Let me just finish by saying, I'm almost finished. I was talking to Rabbi Gordon about it. I was talking to Rabbi Gordon about it. He said, in fact, there was a situation that the OU was considering hashgacha on a certain setup, a Chalav Yisroel setup, which they turned down. He didn't say this was not the only problem, but one of the problems was that the farms were very spread apart from each other, such that if the Mashiach is at one farm, it's obvious at the other farm that he's not showing up. Okay, he didn't say that was not the only. He said there were a lot of issues of control in the way that was set up, and I have to tell you something. In these kind of situations, even having too much yichim, that's a big expense, but having too much yichim really solves all that problem, because one guy can be one place and has nothing to do with the other guy. Okay, so it has a certain number. What do you want to see?
I'm saying it's a problem. It's a problem. It's a problem. Any Chalav Yisroel set up when you go from farm to farm, because you need a tremendous amount of legit hashgacha and thinking before, and exactly to prevent any type of this type of situation. Like you mentioned, 3-4 different cases. There's all different types of permutations of cases. How the farm is set up, where you can have a look at from, and if the guy in 15, 1 minute, he can pull an animal from another farm and bring it over there.
Right. So nowadays everyone's got a cell phone. It's like that. It's not even a matter of how far can I see it from the top of the building. It's
not happening.
It's not happening.
Let's say something. Does he have any reason to go? Can you turn it off? No, 1 second. Does he have any reason to bring another horse also from another farm, start hopping over with the?
No. That's
all part of the Vayeh. I know there's no possibility.
Why is it a possibility?
No, wait.
The guy knows he's gone for 20 minutes. He knows he's gone 20 minutes. Why can't I know?
There's no horses in this farm. Okay?
No.
He's down the road. You know horses 10 minutes from here?
Okay, so it takes him 10 minutes. They have to understand.
So he has 10 minutes. He knows he has 10 minutes.
Okay. So you have to.
Exactly, you have to, and they're not. You have to, and they're not.
No.
You said two different things. One thing you said is should we be Kosher that he's going to do it? That has not to do with Chol. That's to do with our next couple of times when we talk about Chol stuff. We'll bring other rayas that he didn't use milk. The second thing you said is maybe it'll take him 15 minutes to get the horse, in which case I have that much time. So to which Jussie is responding, but you have to plot that all out. If you say my farms are half an hour apart from each other, can someone look and make sure that there's no horses within 10, 15 minutes?
Okay, so you have to figure out.
Right,
how many horses are there in Wisconsin? I think they're much more.
See, you didn't say you have to go
I'm not here.
They're on the cell phone. Says, where are you? We're going to start. He says, I'm over here and over here, 20 minutes away.
So is there anybody with a horse around there? I don't know, maybe there is. Maybe there is.
I got to tell you.
It's like a pickup truck.
The shluch doesn't have any either. The shluch doesn't have any idea either.
Okay, yes.
Nowadays, there's nobody that milks by hand. There's nobody that milks by hand. Everything is automated. If you look at an udder in the United States, you look at an udder of a horse or a pig, they will not fit into the machinery that will fit into a cow's udder.
Correct.
So you have to be Kosher then also that they're going to start milking it by hand.
Okay, again, that's for next time, which is what happens if I have a different raya that he didn't use other milk? We're not talking about that. That's for whole stuff. Right now we're talking about the things.
Almost nobody in the United States that looks horses or pigs or anything like that. So
they do it.
Yeah. Hello. That's for next time. Next time we're going to talk about that.
How much?
Next time we're going to talk about whether you could bring other kinds of rayas.
Midnight madness. Yeah.
Whether you could bring other kinds of rayas that the milk is only cow's milk. That's not for this right.
Really,
Right now we're saying is the yid has to watch it. Is the yid watching it? So Yotzeh v'nichnas only has that much room to it. Doesn't have. You can't just do whatever you want. Okay, next.
It's a very good hitter that the mashgiach is at the farm the whole time.
Of course.
It's a bit it's problematic to have to go from farm to farm. That whole setup is problematic.
Right. So one very fine cheese that we know about. We're thankful that there's only one farm.
I drink lambert's milk. I'm not.
I would want that milk up in different states. We didn't only have the cows on the same farm. The cheese plant was on the same farm.
Okay.
They would pipe the milk straight over to the cheese plant and make the cheese.
Next. So now, if you were to hear what I said so far, what you would think is the din is you would have to be Yotzeh v'nichnas, and you could come to the farms. Again, we talked about that they shouldn't know you're away, but if they don't know that you're not coming, you think you come to the farms who knows how often. Okay, it happens to be there's a tshuva from a sefer called Skan Aaron. We're going to talk about it more in the coming times. Someone who lived between the two world wars, who said in his case. Now I'm not actually saying this. What I'm saying is not going to be accurate completely because he says a b'tzir of many other things. But the case he was describing, he said it would be good enough that the mashgiach should come once a week to each farm. Okay, now, it was a tzir of many things. But just to give you an example of how far you could stretch, he says as long as they don't know, and as long as sometimes the guy comes more often. But he says from his perspective, he would be comfortable. One guy should cover up many farms. There was no way to know when you were in the next farm. As long as they don't know when you're coming, you could be such a thing. So in theory, that could be such a thing, and there would be much debate as to what does it mean to be Yotzeh v'nichnas. But in Lamaisa, it's not what we do. Okay, and you'll hear why. In Lamaisa, we piece a bunch of things together, and I'll tell you what the standard way that people do Chalav Yisroel.
Is it as if the farm is designated for Chalav Yisroel? If let's say the Chalav Yisroel run certain parts of the time.
Yeah.
So then, we need we're once a week work for Chalav. Say. Coming once a week is if that farm is always doing Chalav Yisroel.
No, that is Chalav Yisroel.
Right. It's always Chalav Yisroel. If it comes only, if you drop it once a week,
but it becomes Chalav Yisroel always.
Okay. The Ramah says that when you start a Chalav Yisroel run, okay, we're going to digress a little bit and come back to what the actual limits is of how we do make Chalav Yisroel. The Ramah says when you have Ein Davar Tamar Bedroy, the yid has to check the containers and the vats, all the equipment has to be checked beforehand to make sure there's no trace milk inside it already. Okay, as we said, it doesn't make any sense for the yid to watch the milking if there was milk in it beforehand. Okay, so the yid's got to check the containers beforehand. Okay, so that means that today we don't milk into buckets, we milk into vats or into tanker trucks or tanks or things like that. So that means those tanks have to be checked to make sure that they're empty. And that means not only does it have to be checked, so to speak, at the beginning of the milking, it has to be checked at the beginning of every time a tank is filled. It means if in the middle of the milking we have to switch from one tank to another, or from one trailer to another trailer, then that has to be checked also. That's the clear that we're milking into now, and that clear has to be checked.
For that, there's a standard, procedures that you use in tanks that clean, otherwise you're going to have germs.
Right, but
that's checking the thing.
But you should know that it's also standard that milk trucks go from farm to farm picking up milk. So they go. So I go to this farm, and then I come to the next farm with 100 gallons in there. So it wouldn't be unusual for a milk truck to come already with milk in it. It's not like picking up chocolate that they come empty. No, he could come with milk in his truck. That wouldn't be strange that he should do that. So he has to check the truck to make sure it's empty. Okay.
The hoses and whatnot.
Look, all that, yes, it has to be checked to be sure. So now, I'm going to mention that there are people who say, we would say, let a cow get milk 3 times a day. So if at midnight they start milking the cows, and it goes from midnight till 6 a.m., until they milk all the cows. And then there's a break until 8 o'clock, till they have to go back to the first group again. And the mashgiach is standing there in the farm. The mashgiach he's still Yotzeh v'nichnas because he's here for the 8 o'clock anyhow. He's just a little less Yotzeh v'nichnas, but he's there anyhow. So we would think that the mashgiach does not have to check it again, because the tchilas ha'chaliva we would guess is at midnight. That's when you started milking. Between 6 and 8, there happened to have been no cows. We would think shouldn't make a difference. Just like between 1 o'clock and 1:04, there were no cows. Also, there's a big difference. So there was a break for a minute, and so now there's a break for 2 hours. We would think, that you should need to check it in, because at the Tchilas HaChaliva he checked, and now if there's milk in there, we should make a difference. Okay, so there is milk in there. He watched that milk being done. But you should know that there are those who think otherwise. I don't have a good handle onto why they hold like that. A good understanding. I tried. I don't have a good understanding. So why do they hold like that? That every time, now, if at 6 o'clock you finish, and now 8 o'clock you start again, you need to recheck all the equipment once again to make sure it's empty. I don't really have a good handle as to why they do that.
What do you mean empty? It's filled from the 6 o'clock.
So if it has milk from 6 o'clock, they would seal it and then come back to see their seal.
Wow.
But what about the actual where they pump? When you draw the milk out of the cow, it goes into a little bucket, it's a little container before it makes it on further. So they check all those containers, make sure that everything is empty. Okay, I can't say that I have a good.
And even let's say in the middle of filling a tanker truck, and the shift ended, and they stop, and they're cleaning, and they come back and tell us, the tanker truck, they're not going to throw out the tanker truck.
Right, so you'd have to seal it. According to this approach, you have to seal it up. You have to seal it. You wouldn't. Right, so it's hard.
The pipe is still connected.
It's hard to get it. And what does it even mean? Why are they judging Tchilas HaChaliva at starting it at 8 o'clock? I mean, there is a certain thing that's happening. At 8 o'clock, each cow that had been here is getting another chance.
Yeah.
But really, what's the difference between cow number 1 and number 2, or between cow number 500 and number 1? What's really the difference? Okay, so I'm not sure I really understand. Okay. But now, the Ramah said another thing. The Ramah said another thing that there's a minhag not only to check it by the Tchilas HaChaliva, but not to use kalim of goyim even if you do check them. Okay? So the first thing is that the Ramah said because the chashash is there might be tzachzuche chalav. There might be little drops of chalav. Okay? The implication is that, I don't know if it's clear, but the implication is that once there's a takana that you have to have Chalav Yisroel, the chashash is even if there's tiny amounts that would be bottled. Okay, the wording tzachzuche chalav gives you the feeling of it's so little that it's going to be an amount that's going to be bottled. Right? You check the kli, it's empty. How much could be left? So Aval picking the minhag as the extension of the din is to be chosh even when there's tiny bits. Okay, but now, so I just told you. Well, I'm surprised you're sitting here so calmly. I just told you. The Ramah says it. The Ramah says the minhag is we don't use goyish kalim. Okay, we don't use a goyish keli.
Keli, or we don't. It's not clean.
We don't use a goyish. The Ramah said.
Did I miss that?
You were sleeping.
No, I wasn't here when he said that.
It's a shema. Don't use the minhag to minhag.
No, he says, but the evidence mutter. But the evidence ain't lochash. What is
I
it?
wasn't here when they said
But the evidence ain't lochash choseh. So what is it? So you say now use goyish kalim. So we go to a farm. So they use all the goyish kalim. So the yid checks it. So what does that look? The yid checks it.
Yeah, you're not supposed to use goyish kalim.
So the Prichadar says.
So you got to tell it.
So the Prichadar says. The Chalav says that only applies if you walk over to a kli that a guy uses as is. If they washed it out, then there's no possibility that there's tzachzuche chalav left in behind, then this minhag doesn't apply. It's only a minhag. That minhag, that if you checked it, you shouldn't be signing because maybe there's little drops left. He says if you washed it out, that would be good enough. So the Ramah said, maybe so. No. After he said that you checked it, it goes even further. That even after you checked it, it's not good enough because it goes clean. Right? But so the Prichadar is saying, but if you washed it, you checked it, maybe you missed something. But if you washed it, what could be left there? And obviously it's over Simulchan because Lamai says we use goyish kalim. We use, like he just had a tank, a truck comes in, the mashgiach sticks his head and it's empty. Okay, so they're using all the milk equipment, the piping, and all the equipment, they look at it and it's empty. Okay, but maybe Shem and Ishur would say suchechol, so we say if you washed it out, that would be good enough, so the yid doesn't have to wash it, he has to see that it had been washed, and that would be good enough.
How hot is the milk when it comes out of the udder?
As hot as the cow is. No, it's as hot as the cow is. Okay,
No, some kind of a cow about 90, 101.
Okay, so now we're ready to explain what we do. We had started by saying is how much Yotzeh v'nichnas does the person have to be to make the Chalav Yisroel. So what we have is, okay, theoretically you could have Yotzeh v'nichnas every couple of days. But Lamais we have like this. The Ramah said at the beginning of every Chaliva, the yid has to be there. The beginning of Chaliva doesn't just mean the beginning of the milking. The milking, even when you start, like, when we're going to do on Wednesday, on Tuesday, whenever they do their milking that day you started, it means every time you start a new tank, a new truck, any piece of equipment that's new, someone has to be there to check it. So the Mashgiach, in practice, is always there at the beginning, has to be at the beginning of the Chaliva. And another thing, which is not, so to speak, part of our din, it's really like Kuf Yud Ches, when you finish the Chaliva, the Mashgiach has to be there to seal things up. Okay, you're about to put the milk is in a truck, the truck is getting ready to leave, it's in a tank, he's got to seal it up. So the Mashgiach ends up having to be there for that. In addition to that, there's it's become accepted that the Mashgiach has to show up at least once during the Chaliva. Okay, and that, of course he can't only show up once, he has to usually show up once, but sometimes show up 3 times. But it means that so the Mashiach is told you have to be the beginning of the Chaliva, at the end of the Chaliva, in the middle. Each one for sort of a different reason. The beginning is
what do you mean the end of the Chaliva?
When they're sealing everything up.
Closing everything up. So one is the beginning is the Ramah said you have to check it to make sure it's empty at the beginning. The end is for the cleaning up, making sure it's sealed and the way it's supposed to be. And in the middle is the, so to speak, Yotzeh v'nichnas. Okay, and that's basically what people do. Okay, each one for sort of its own reason. But that's what each one of them do. Okay, now, before we have one last bit to do, I have to tell you that really, right at this part we should be talking about, this is really the part I wanted to talk about, if the Mashgiach can do his hashgacha by video camera. Okay, that should be the end of discussion of what a person has to do for making Chalav Yisroel. But I realize that we need to talk about Chalav Stam probably 2 times first before we get back to that. Okay, so you have to excuse me, we're going to have to pause on that. In order to get the shilas that there are about video, we have to hear about Chalav Stam first. Okay. One last thing, so I'm going to say one last thing that has to do with Chalav Yisroel, which has nothing really to do with our simon, and that is what's called DA cows. Okay, and that is as follows. There are many ways an animal could become a treifa. If an animal is a treifa, then of course its milk is treifa. Okay? So there's one way, usually when you milk a cow, you have no idea if the animal is a treifa or not, because treifas are internal. The problems are internal. But there's a surgery that they do on cows when they have too much gas, okay? And that surgery that they do on the cows could potentially make the animal into a treifa. Okay, we're not going to talk about that child, whether it does or doesn't make it a treifa. It's quite a to do, and it's in Shulchan Aruch, it's in Paiskim, all the way down to nowadays as to whether the surgeries and which types of surgeries make the animals a treifa or not.
Even though it lives more than 12 months afterwards.
That's part of the shiloh. This maybe part of the it's not for us to talk about.
I don't know.
Okay, but. So what it is, but what the lamaisa for us is that the people who allow Chalav Stam, who eat Chalav Stam, which we haven't talked about yet, but the people who eat Chalav Stam are assuming that either that surgery doesn't make it a treifa, or it makes it a treifa, but it's so uncommon the way it makes it a treifa. They're ignoring the fact that possibility of that surgery making the animal treifa. They're allowing the milk without any oversight for that surgery, and the people who keep Chalav Yisroel have in practice have all accepted they don't allow cows with these kind of surgeries. Okay, partially because they choose to be machmer, and partially because there's a Mashiach on the farm. So the Mashiach's on the farm. He could say, why shouldn't I weed out those cows that had the surgery if I could tell?
And you could tell them how the surgery.
Very often. First of all, you could check. You could tell from the outside. You could see a scar in them for a certain amount of time afterwards. And second is, as Yankee said, in modern farms, the cows are all marked. And they all have a long history to them. So on the computer you could tell who had the surgery. Okay, they're very sophisticated.
It's once the Mashiach is there, it's not just why not. It's also that once he's there, he knows.
Correct. It might make it work. I'm not here to talk really about the DA cows. The DA stands for, if you care, DA stands for displaced abomasum. Okay, so it's one of the stomachs.
I was wondering what they were getting.
No. A stomach.
There's too many old radio shows.
A stomach that's out of place, that gets out of place usually after the first birth. Anyhow, but so it's become that a mashgiach who's doing Chalav Yisroel, who's overseeing Chalav Yisroel, has another job to create Chalav Yisroel. Aside from watching that there aren't horses on the farm, he also's job is to weed out and make sure they don't bring any of these DA cows. It's become a part of Chalav Yisroel. It has nothing to do per se with Chalav Yisroel, but it's become part of it. And with that, in Eretz Yisrael, it also part of the mashgiach's job is to make sure that they don't use milk that was milked on Shabbos. When they make Chalav Yisroel, it's another thing. Again, nothing to do with Chalav Yisroel per se. It's sort of like thrown into his responsibility.